It's my pleasure to introduce our guest lecturer today, Mr. Stephen Kramer. Let me say it the right way. Steve is, I would say he's done a lot of entrepreneurial things in various businesses. Any of you that may have been to Utah or heard of where the Jazz play, the arena that they play in is the Energy Solutions Arena. And Steve is the former CEO of Energy Solutions, which is a global nuclear service company straight on the New York Stock Exchange. It's fun. We actually had him in a small environmental entrepreneurship class yesterday, and it's fun to share back and forth with him some of the really interesting things that they've done in several of the companies he's been involved with. He's going to leave probably a little bit more time for Q&A at the end of his lecture today. If it's anything like what we experienced yesterday in our other class, I'm certain there'll be lots of questions that you may have for him, so we'll look forward to that. As well as being the co-founder of Energy Solutions, he was also involved with another company, ISG Resources, as well as Kramer Noble Engineering. Has been involved with, ISG grew up from a regional company to be the largest marketer and manager of coal combustion products in the entire United States. It's really exciting to have Steve with us today. He did start off his early career as an engineer, civil and environmental engineer, getting his degree from Utah State University. Was it BSN?
Just BS.
BS from there, and we're really excited to have him here. This is, I think, one of our great opportunities today to hear from one of the country, or probably the world's expert in some fields. And so we're really excited. So please join me in welcoming Steve Kramer as our guest lecturer here today.
Thank you.
Turn that on if you want, Gap.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Can you guys on the side see the board up here, or the screen? Try to get that in there. Sorry for the extra noise. I thought President Wheelwright was going to be here today, so I even have a tie with me too. He told me one day one evening when I was having dinner with him a few weeks ago. He said to me, he says, you know, sometimes you need to wear a tie just to show the students it's important to wear a tie sometimes. But the last time I wore a tie in Hawaii was 1984. And we were building a hydroelectric plant over on Hilo. And I came over to Oahu, and we were meeting with Hawaiian Electric Company. And so I thought, well, I'm going in to see a big utility. So I was all decked out in my suit and tie, and I walked in there, and of course nobody else was. And I walked in, and the guy looked at me and says, you really show us a Hallie, you know. And so I've tried never to wear a tie here since that. So I really appreciate the opportunity of coming over and sharing some thoughts, some of my passions. I've given this particular presentation in several universities, Tulane, Columbia, quite a number of them around the country. It's a great passion to me. Going back a long time. You still hear me? Okay. Going back a long time, because when I graduated, I shouldn't tell you the year, but I will so you can figure out how old I am. 1973, the ripe old age of 21, and I had a job offer from Bechtel down in San Francisco. And they sent me an airplane ticket, but the conservative guy I am, I sold the airplane ticket back to the airlines and took the money and drove from Logan down to San Francisco so I could take my wife with me. And I thought that would be a very nice thing to do, and we go down and have a little vacation. Well, in the middle of the night, at those days, we were just starting the first real energy crisis in America, 1973, almost 40 years ago. And I got to Reno about 9 o'clock at night and pulled up to a gas station to get gas. And there was...
We have a technical difficulty. The mic fell.
That's what I did, huh? So I pulled up the gas station behind about 100 cars in line, and the gas station had been closed down, and there wasn't one gas station open, and they were, in those days, if you had your license plate number was an odd number, you got to fill up on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and if it was an even number, you had Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And luckily mine was the next day, so I could get gas, so I just sat in line there, slept in the car overnight, and spent the night in Reno. I was supposed to have been in San Francisco for a 10 a.m. Interview with Bechtel, and so I was a little late for my interview, but no gas to get there. And in those days, the big uproar at that time was, we've got to have a national energy policy. We have to have a natural energy policy. We can't do it without it. Today, nearly 40 years later, we still are no closer to a national energy policy than we were in 1973. We've never had the will or the planning or the desire and the toughness in our political system in order to have an energy policy in the United States of America, which is really a sad story. Over the last 10 years, we've lost a lot of fine young men and women in Afghanistan and Iran. And it's been because we have such interest in those areas. It's not because we were mad at Saddam Hussein, and it's really not because Osama bin Laden. The reason Osama bin Laden came over and got us because he didn't want us in that region working. I mean, they didn't want us in their homeland. And so we've spent a lot of lives, we've spent a lot of wounded people, a lot of our fellow very brave comrades will spend the rest of their life with one leg or one arm, and they're wonderful people. What they've done is absolutely good, but it all comes back that we've never had the will to have a national energy policy, and so that's why it's so passionate to me. The world outlook, and it's interesting to see what's going on right now, because America's always been so big in energy, but energy is continuing to grow everywhere. We have a great lifestyle in the United States of America. We live better than anyone else in the world does. We have the most wonderful opportunities. How many are from the United States? How many are from outside the United States? About half and half. As you know, we are incredibly lucky people, and to be able to have the things that we have. And we're very blessed. But the fact of the matter is, everybody else in the world wants to have the same things we have. And so world energy demand today, where it used to be just the United States causing the demand and the growth in the world, it's really being caused by the rest of the world. That's what we're going to talk about today. Energy demands, the cost, diesel fuel, gasoline. You've all seen what's going there. This morning, President Obama came out with a statement he's going to take away all the tax credits from oil companies, which is a very small amount of money, but great political speech. Again, we're using energy as a political platform rather than really trying to solve the problems. But what we really need to do is figure out a whole basket of sustainability of how we make our things happen. Right now, we're working with BYU Hawaii here, and before next Christmas, we're going to have a PV field built for you. And so about 20 to 25% of your power that you'll use here on campus will be coming from solar energy. So it's really a great opportunity to be able to do that. So it'll be a lot of fun to do that. On the next one. To kind of show you, if you can see this chart up here, it graphs GDP growth and it versus energy production. And you can watch, and it goes back to 1951, and it graphs, and you can see as our economy has grown, our energy consumption grows. And that's the growth in GDP versus the growth in energy consumption. When we've gone into a little recession, then our growth in energy goes down. And the way we get ourselves out of it, so America has built its entire economy off of cheap energy. And that's one of the problems we got right now, is we're having a really hard time to get back to our cheap energy, and so it's really slowing down growth. But if you watch, the growth in the energy up and down has been caused by energy in the past. Hopefully through sustainable ways, by changing all these light bulbs in here to LEDs and having the air conditioning units become much more efficient. We'll be able to change those things and slow the growth of energy use and energy consumption. On average, 0.32 kilowatt hours of energy is used for each $1 of GDP growth, of GDP production. So it's, so as we grow, we're using 0.32 kilowatt hours. As China grows, we're using 0.32 kilowatt hours. As India grows, and all of these growing economies around the world that are really going fast with a lot of people, that's what's causing the high gas prices in America. It's not so much America's growth or America's energy right now. It's not so much the Middle East right now. What's really causing it is just overall world demand. We are now a net exporter of energy. This is in 2011 for the first time, and probably since the 1960s. We will export. We are a net exporter. We're exporting more energy out than we're bringing in, mainly because of natural gas. And you say, well, why aren't we keeping it here in America? Well, if we said, okay, I mean, I said, you know, if we're going to drill out America's oil, why don't we put an export tax on it? And so the oil companies want to leave it here rather than ship it to another country. But if we did that, who else would do that? Would Venezuela do that? Would Brazil do that? I mean, we live in a world market these days, and so you really can't, if we put an export tax on energy, the people who we buy from put it on it, and all of a sudden we get into, you know, a very much higher rates for energy costs. China is probably our single biggest nemesis in this country right now. They own, you know, over 50% of our national debt is owned by China. China is, you know, owns about 90% of our precious metals that are mineable today are owned by the Chinese now. So the metals that we use to make chips, to make everything like that, they've gone out and they've recognized that the way they solidify their manufacturing base is by owning the materials, the materials you need to make the chips and stuff. And so China, and then they can control the amount of materials of those minerals that can be shipped out to other people, so they can continue to make sure that they're in the place to put their people to work, because they understand the way to grow your economy, the way to make people happy is to give them jobs, and so they're very focused on doing that. If you look at the energy consumption for the first time, go back one, first time you can see they finally surpassed us. You can see where they were in 1965. You can even see where they were in comparison to our energy in 2000 versus 2000 over there. We were almost double. We used almost twice as much energy 10 years ago as China did. Today, they're the #1 energy consumer in the world. And so you can see the competition, the world competition we're having for growth and for energy resources. You look at the population of the United States, 310, China 1.4 billion, India 1.2 billion. You can see the GDPs, the GDP per capita, the energy consumption. You see China passed us up. Just the last 2 years, they've passed us up. The annual growth rate, we're at 1%. They're at 5.1%. India's at 3.6%. Just huge, huge growth outside the United States. And the average power per capita, you can see we're still the energy pigs of the world. And we're using, you know, we're still using 4 times the energy of China per capita. So we use a lot of energy. Probably one of the things we're going to have to change as the world, as we move on through history. Over the next 25 years, 25% of the projected growth in energy will be outside developed nations. So outside the United States, outside Europe, outside Russia, outside even China. So you can see the demand around the world. Everyone wants to have wants to have basic power. A lot of Africa doesn't even have any electricity right now. But everyone wants some, and most people want more than one light bulb. And so it's a real issue that's coming down the line. Greenhouse gases, I put this up to talk about it and hope somebody will ask some questions about it, because it says carbon dioxide release is expected to increase 20% over the next 25 years, increasing temperature by 3.5 degrees. If you have noticed, you don't hear politicians, you don't hear the Sierra Club, you don't hear anyone anymore talking about global warming. They're talking about climate change. We all know that at some point in time, the northern end, the Puget Sound up above Alaska, had to be a tropic. If it wasn't a tropic at some time, there wouldn't be anything up there to turn oil, and sure enough, there's oil up there. So at some point in time, there had to be a lot of growth up there. It hasn't always been an ice cap. So at some point in time, you had to have something up there. The last 10 years, the reason they've quit talking about global warming so much and talking about climate change caused by CO2 is because the last 10 years, the best scientific data shows that we got cooler by about 1/10 of a degree. And so it's really changed over the last 2 or 3 years because of scientific proof right now. But if you look at the history and you look at how temperatures have gone up and down over the years, you know, from Ice Age, from the study of scientists, it's gone up and down all the time. And you know, whether we're just in a cycle, we know that on the Earth, because of tree rings and things like that, we've had higher CO2 levels than we have right now. But it's still an issue. It's something we need to be concerned about anytime we do anything to the environment, whether it's actually spilling your gas out of your car on the ground or whether it's creating CO2. It's something we need to manage. We need to respect the earth and what it is. And that's, you know, those were pretty cheap prices, $1.59 for regular. You'd like to have that today, wouldn't you? Big political issue this year in the United States. As you watch, Speaker Gingrich says he can get it back to $2.50. I think it'd be very hard to get it back to $2.50, mainly because of the world demand. The only way you can do that is for us to be more introverted and cause our energy to be used. Not doing the pipelines from Canada down to the Gulf, doing some of those things is causing us grief, in my opinion. I think we have way too much politics, not people willing to stand up and be tough. So as you're back in your home state and you're talking to the people who are running for office this year, one of the things you need to say is, hey, let's make some hard decisions. Let's really have an energy policy that moves ahead. And let's go out and let's develop the energy sources that we have available to us to do. Is sustainable power going to change anything? The next one. This little invention right here that I'm speaking off of, has saved a lot more trees than Greenpeace has ever saved. So technology is important. I mean, we've almost, we should, once my generation dies off, we'll probably do away with needing paper. Because, it really is becoming an electronic world, and it saves tremendous amount of resources because of that. So it's really important to do the technology. Technology has a lot to do with sustainability. We're jumping in today onto the next one. The cost comparison of different sources of energy. If you look up there, hydro, 60, I'll have to open up my own, I can read it right here. Hydro is $91 per megawatt hour. You look at solar PV, which is what we're putting in here, $2.11 per megawatt hour. Natural gas, conventional, if you look down, is about $65. Why don't we use all natural gas? It's by far the cheapest. Today, the power rates, what keeps the power rates cheap today are all the old coal-fired power plants and all the nuclear power plants. Nuclear power today runs about 2 cents a kilowatt hour, about $20. If you look at coal's running about 4 cents a kilowatt hour, or $40. And that's what keeps America in a competitive nature like that, about 70% of our power. We'll talk about that in just a second. I've got another slide coming up in a second. You can see the wind resources, and you can see the coal, and I've told you what the existing are. And you can see that renewable energies, sustainable energies, are generally a lot more expensive because of the technology than the conventional coal and nuclear and plants like that. But what's happening is technology is taking over, just like the drive. In installed cost per kilowatt hour in 1998 for a solar system was $10.87. Today it's $2.80. So it's dropped by 5 times in the last 10 years. It's all through technology. It's all through people, because we've been willing to invest in the higher price energy, and it's been subsidized. Solar energy today is still subsidized by nearly 50%. So when we build a project here on campus, the federal government will be paying, when I say the federal government, our tax dollars will be paying about 50% of the cost of it. Very high tax subsidy, the same way in wind, very high tax subsidy. That's why I got such a kick out of President Obama this morning, saying he was going to take the oil subsidies away. The total oil subsidies in the United States today are about $7 million a year. It all has to do with drilling. And so the tax subsidy comes in order to encourage people to drill. They get rapid depreciation. They get some production tax credits, causing people to want to drill wells and risk the money to go out and drill wells, because you drill good wells and you drill dry holes. And sometimes they don't all work out. And so it's a way to encourage that. Renewable energy last year was about $70 billion in tax subsidy, 10 times what the oil companies get. So, but on the other hand, this chart right here is to show that had we have not invested this money, the sun is the cheapest power rate we had. If we weren't investing these monies right now, we wouldn't be driving the price from $10 down to $2. There's just 2 weeks ago, there was a article in the Wall Street Journal talking about a new solar panel coming out. You know, it's 3 or 4 years out from being to where it'll be able to be financeable, but they're talking about being able to cut this price again in half with a new type of panel that doesn't uses many less materials in making it. And so all those things go along. Wind power today is being driven down. It's gone down significantly in cost, and they feel like within 4 or 5 years with wind power, it will be competitive with new nuclear or new coal or anything like that. So solar is getting the same way in the right areas. When you've got lots of sunshine, solar is getting down to where it's going to be able to compete. The tax subsidies on solar go on till 2016. The tax subsidies on wind actually ended this year. And President Obama is trying to get the subsidies back onto wind, because it's really stopped that industry. You won't see many more windmills built after the end of this year, unless the production tax credit goes back on it, because it's still higher than you can do other things with. And of course, the cheap price of natural gas, the new things that you hear on television about fracking, where they go down in the ground and they hydraulically break the rock up in order to get more natural gas out. The last 3 years, the natural gas industry now says that we have enough natural gas that they could fuel all the stationary power, which is, you know, your electricity, plus every automobile and truck that we have on the roads for 100 years. And that's why natural gas prices right now, you know, in 2000, natural gas got as high as $16 per million BTUs. Today it's $2 per million BTUs. And there's just a lot of gas out there. It's all in the United States, so it's really a interesting thing to do. One of the things Hawaii is looking at right now is getting off diesel and bringing compressed natural gas here and changing out their generators to do compressed natural gas. Another thing they're looking at hard is, you know, the one thing Hawaii has in energy that no one else has is geothermal. And they have about right close to 100 megawatts of generation on the Big Island and just outside of Hilo. And when it was put in the middle 80s, there was a lot of controversy. And it was really controversial, both from the people who live there, they don't like things in their backyard, to people who felt like if you drilled into the volcano, it would explode and blow the cap off and cause massive damage. But there's enough heat on the Big Island that you could generate power for all of Hawaii, and you could generate power for most of the west coast of the United States. And you know, there's a lot of underwater cables right now that run between islands, and a lot of underground water cables that run between the United States and here, and between the Pacific and here. They're all communication type cables rather than power cables. But in the Philippines, for example, they do a lot of this. They have geothermal, they generate a lot of their power geothermal, and they have underground or underwater electrical cables running between the islands in order to generate them. If they can work out the environmental consequences and make everyone feel comfortable, long term, Hawaii could end up where you're right now, that by Your power rates here are probably an average of 3 times higher than the rest of the United States, 4 times higher than Utah, for example. And you could end up with the cheapest power rate here in Hawaii if they use that natural resource. Again, sustainable power, it's available, but you know, there's political decisions that have to be made and social decisions that have to be made to see if they want to use them, but it's a great opportunity. The energy outlook, U.S. electrical sales to increase by 23% by 2035. You can see what's going on. Nuclear is staying about the same, mainly because new nuclear is very expensive. Since Fukushima in Japan happened last year, all of the plants are being reviewed. The United States has 104 plants. They have the first 2 plants since 1984 under construction right now. So there are 2 new plants coming on. They're very, very expensive, $14 billion per copy. The nice thing about them is their energy costs. Nuclear power, we don't do it yet in the United States, but in France, for example, 80% of France's power comes from nuclear. They recycle their fuel. When they recycle their fuel, it's 97% recyclable. So they basically can dissolve it down with chemicals, take the bad actors out of it, and they get 97% of the power back. And so it's almost a sustainable power. I believe it is a sustainable power. But today the cost is very much, and there's also a lot of issues with it. The plants have to be built extremely strong. In China today, there's 40 plants under construction. China is building 200 coal-fired power plants a year. They're right now building the entire United States fleet of coal-fired power plants is 250. China's building 200 a year. They've got 40 big nukes under construction. You can kind of see the growth that's going on around the world and what's going on. By 2035, we hope to have 15.6% of domestic power from renewables. Now that sounds pretty good. It says we've got 10.4% today. That's a lot of power, 10% from renewables. Hydro is renewable. So you see there's quite a bit of hydro here in the islands, not percentage-wise, but there's quite a bit. You look at the big dams around the United States and the hydro that comes off of those. Hydro, of that 10.4%, hydro is 9.2. So we really have, of wind, solar, geothermal, biomass, we have 1.2% of our total generation in America today comes from renewable. So moving from 1.2 up to, what would it be, 6.6 is a lot. I mean, that's a lot to move, especially when you look at the number, you look at the coal and you look at the nuclear. People talk about hating coal. If we took coal out of America's mix right now, we would not be able to survive. I mean, there is 50% of our energy comes basically out from coal right now. They're doing a lot of improvements to it, but there's a very strong political move to try to have renewables replace coal. Our power rates would all be very, very, very high if that happened immediately. So we have to get the technology to catch up. And over the years, as the coal plants age out and they end, hopefully we'll be ready with new sustainable technologies to be able to take off and have it well work. I really believe that we need to do all of it. We need to do solar, wind, biofuels, natural gas, oil, clean coal. Some people say there isn't such a thing as clean coal, but I believe that there can be. Nuclear and hydro. America is pretty well built out in hydro. I mean, there's not a lot of, if there was a stream that was available to dam up and put a hydro plant on, it was done 40 years ago because that was the cheapest, best power you could get. And so you're not going to see a lot of growth there, but we need every one of these technologies, and we need to advance every one of these technologies in order to keep up with the demand we have in the United States and around the world. The challenge is ahead: cost. I mean, whether you're building a nuclear power plant, whether you're building a PV solar field, whether you're building a coal-fired power plant or a natural gas plant, cost is always going to be the issue. Today, nothing's cheaper than natural gas. If government did not put renewable standards in the continental United States. If California didn't say that we want 35% of our power to come from renewables by 2030, you would never see anything built other than a gas-fired power plant today because natural gas is so cheap. And so the thing that is driving renewables right now is basically government through requirements that requires you to have so much renewable standards that says we want X amount of our power to come from renewables, and then the tax subsidies that are willing to be done in order to make that happen. And they have to go together because otherwise the rates would just go through the ceiling. Public acceptance, we've been through a recession. I've been watching, thinking that through this recession that renewables would take a real hit. Because of President Obama, it's been such a mainstay of his platform. They have survived through this recession. Normally when money gets tight, people want to spend less of it, not more of it. But it's also shown me that as I've gone around America, including a very strong feeling here in Hawaii, that people really do want to go to a more sustainable lifestyle, that they really do understand that as the world continues to grow and we get more and more people, that we have to find other ways of doing things, and they're willing to invest in the future in doing that. And that's really what sustainability and what sustainable power is about. Energy storage, I told the guys in the class yesterday, if you want to be a trillionaire, go invent the best battery ever made. Go invent a battery that'll store a megawatt of power for 12 hours, 12 megawatt hours of power, and I guarantee you, you'll be worth $1 trillion. Lots of people working on it right now. If you want to go study how to do it, it's a great place for an entrepreneur to have a great impact on how the world is today. And that's what we're really all about. Each of us, we take the responsibilities upon ourselves to try to make the world a better place. It's what our brains are for. It's what I believe God put us here to do, is to make it a better place. And with that, I'm just going to open up to questions. And if you have none, we'll leave. But if you have some, we'll go on.
On your chart, you show advanced coal. What was that?
It's a reburning it's basically a reburning of the emissions, so that you, instead of just sending the gases out the stack through a scrubber or something like that, they go back in and you actually inject something with a higher set of volatiles, and you try to burn out. You basically try to destroy the NOx and the SOx through increased temperature through a higher, and generate power off that too. So it's almost making a combined cycle out of coal. The cost isn't there yet. It can be done on a workbench. It's been done in prototypes, but it's not ready for prime time yet. But the coal guys want to make it that way. Which, when you think about China making, you think the wind blows from China toward the United States, China toward Hawaii, and you have those days when it's kind of dark and gloomy. It may be the 200 new coal-fired power plants in China that's coming on every year, and they still do not have the same air quality regulations we have in the United States. So that will end up becoming we know as a fact that it is coming clear onto the continental United States, that we're getting emissions all the way across. That will become an issue in the future. Yeah. So is nuclear just too expensive for us to do it, or are people scared of it, or what's the deal? Not scared of it anymore. I was most impressed as Fukushima happened to watch the New York Times and a few of the more liberal press outlets, Washington Post. There was not a cry to stop nuclear in the United States. President Obama stood up very strongly and said nuclear is still part of it. We need to do it right. We need to check the earthquake resistance of all of our current power plants and our new power plants. The new power plants that they're building right now, there is no issues with those at all. They basically are sitting on a movable foundation. They'll shake all over the place, and the plant will just, it's an incredible thing, the way they've designed the new plants. But we need to check the other ones. But people are not scared of them. They're very, very costly. If natural gas was at $10, $10 to $12, you would see nuclear. Nuclear was coming out the last 4 or 5 years. well, I should say from about 2004 till 2007 and 8, there actually in the United States were proposed 35 new nuclear power plants. 2008, they figured out how to make fracking work. They went out and got into the shell, and all of a sudden could break the shell up and get the gas out. Nuclear went, just because, you know, $65 versus $200 is a huge difference. Plus, a lot of the utilities are now no longer controlled by the generation in the United States is about 50% controlled by public service commissions. The other 50% is controlled through merchant power plants. So people are just bidding to sell their power, and to go out and spend $14 billion on a merchant type basis just isn't going to happen. If you've got a PUC like down in the south in Alabama, that's where they're building or in Georgia where they're building the 2 new power plants. It's a regulated utility, and so all of the cost just gets passed on to the ratepayers, and so the utility doesn't have to take the risk. So it's just risk on dollars that's causing it to go down. So, yeah.
The big push with electric cars, is this gonna go away? Because, or I should say, is the reason why they're not pushing for it is for the fact that oil is actually worth so much?
Say that once more.
The electric car push, I noticed that they say not too much about it. Is that because the oil demands and maybe some of the profits people are getting from it, or they're hesitant to push that?
Part of it is that they're not. The United States is an incredibly mobile society, and the range you're able to get out of them is not what a lot of people want to have. You have to have 2 cars if you're going to do that. You have to have one that you're going to drive further than work and back. They're a great go-to-work car. I've driven the new Hyundai, and I've driven the new Volt, and I've driven a Tesla. The Tesla is just fun. I mean, it just screams. It is an amazing little sports car, not very practical. I can barely fit in it, so if you're a big guy, you're not gonna buy very many of them. But it's a fun little car to drive. The Volt, they just have had lots and lots of problems, to the point that I think that the consumer just isn't trustworthy of doing it. The other thing is they're finding that just because you plug it in and you get it out of your household electricity, it still costs money. And it just hasn't caught on. Some of the hybrids are doing pretty well, but even the hybrid cells are way off. I think you'll see those coming back with the higher gas prices. But every time we start making some moves toward actually doing some good things, oil seems to free up, and price goes down, and then we go back to sleep for a couple of years, and then the price sneaks back up, and it takes a couple of years for it to sneak back up, and then here comes some more oil back, so, and the price goes back down. So, and if you look clear back to 1973 till now, it's been just like this. And every time we've started to do good things, the oil companies, the OPEC have decided we don't want to do good things, and so we know how to do that. We just lower the price, then we don't do good things. Japan in 1973, Japan said in 30 years we are going to be off oil. In 30 years, they were off oil because they had the will to do it. They spent a lot of money. To be honest, they killed their economy, but they got off oil. They did what had to be done, and they got off oil. So, pretty impressive. I seen another one back here. Yeah.
When you build a solar power plant, you say there's a lot of government subsidy, a lot of help. On the completion of construction, does the government write you a check, or do they give tax credits?
Through the end of this year, or if we'd have started this project, or if we had bought the solar panels for this project before the end of 2011, they would have written us a check for 30% of the cost, and they would have allowed us to depreciate it over a 5-year period, taking half the depreciation year 1, 20% year 2, and then the other 2 and the other 30%, 10% the next 3 years, which adds up, if you present value the tax credits back, about 50% of the cost. Today, where we didn't safe harbor the panels in under the stimulus bill, we go to a taxpayer who pays a lot of taxes, and we pay them a 7 or 8% return on it. And so instead of paying their income tax, they give the money to buy the panels, to buy the solar project. They get over the 5-year period, they get an 8% return on their money, and it still ends up at about 50%. But there has to be someone else. That's why when you hear about rich people not paying a lot of income taxes, Warren Buffett is just such an interesting guy to me. He always stand up saying rich people ought to pay more taxes. There is nobody in America. I mean, he uses tax credits more than anybody else in America because pays more taxes than anybody in America. And the reason he has low taxes is because he's putting his money into solar projects, into oil and gas, into pipelines, and anything that has a production tax or just an ITC and an investment tax credit, he pours it into there. So he plays the system, but he says the right things on television, so he's a hero. So, yeah, over here.
Why did Energy Solutions choose to, sponsor the Jazz and have their name on there?
You just pay a lot of money. When we bought the original company, Energy Solutions was 9 companies around the world that we brought together in 33 months. We looked at it. We see an industry that was in need of consolidation, and so we went out and consolidated. The only low-level radioactive landfill that takes all of the radioactive waste in America is located in Utah. It was not a very popular thing. People really don't, it's not the most loved thing in the world. You can read the newspapers about me. There's a lot of people who like me, a lot of people who don't like me. So, because I've always been willing to take on tough things, which I think I'm the biggest environmentalist in the world. Some people wouldn't agree with you, but I've been cleaning up the world where other people just talk about it. But in order to bring it out of the light, the guy who owned it before we bought it, kind of his way of running it was keeping it way under the radar screen, so it was kind of dark and secretive, even though it was ran extremely well. It's a very, very safe, it's the best place for it to be, it's an incredible facility. But he just kept it, and we decided a better policy was to bring it out in the open and use the naming of the arena to have people ask questions, want to come out and take tours and understand what we did and overcome the fear rather than have the fear sit out there. And so that's why we did it. And it's just I used to say I sit in the most expensive seats in the arena.
How's that working out?
To start with, really good. If I was a CEO, I wouldn't renew. It's a 10-year contract. I wouldn't renew it. In another 4 years, I wouldn't renew it, but I'm not, so I retired. So it did the good that needed to be done, but it's expensive, and I don't think it's returning back to the shareholders today what is worth it.
Steve, you're quite a visionary things, and as you mentioned yesterday, your timing can be very impeccable. Talking about the debt that's out there, owned by China, the struggles that, the instability in the United States as far as controlling debt, what's it going to take for America to get back on in the lead on a lot of these things? What do you see, or what do we need to do?
Leadership. I mean, it really comes down to having the will and getting Congress and the president. We've never been such a divided nation, so politically. I just think the fighting that goes on is just above and beyond. And you can't say it's one party or the other, because you can't say the Republicans did a better job under Bush when they had the whole thing than the Democrats are doing now. I mean, they all suck. So I mean, excuse it. And I know a lot of them. I have a lot of really good friends that are congressmen and senators. I know a good share of them. They all want to do the right thing. I honestly think we need a constitutional amendment that takes the president to a single 6-year term, leaves the Senate where it's at, but limits terms at 3 times. at 3 terms and moves the House to a 4-year. Poor House guys never quit raising money. How can you expect the House of Representatives, when you've got to run an election that costs you $1 million or $2 million every 2 years to do, all you're doing is raising funds. You don't have time to be a congressman. You're just raising funds to keep your job. And so they move it out to a 4-year term and limit it at 3 terms. And I think that would do more to help. That way people would know they've got a time. In the meantime, I support Orrin Hatch strongly, just because I'd hate to see Utah, my state, do away with we don't need 2 freshman senators. I mean, you need that seniority, as long as that seniority is going to run. But I really think that something like that's going to have to happen. I just don't see, I mean, it's got so expensive to run for office. And you get a president in there, and he spends his first 4 years getting ready to run for his second one. Then these last 4 years, he's sleeping. I think that's ultimately what's going to have to happen. Or some just great leaderships, a passion, or it's going to get so bad that we force it to happen, and that might happen too.
You talked about a national energy policy that I think most of us think we badly need. And I know it's very complicated, but can you give us like 4 or 5 ideas if you were creating a national energy policy? What would be it? I would put tax credits where it would make the most difference. I would put that tax credits in, right now we know we got a lot of natural gas. I would put tax credits into natural gas cars, engines, and for trucks, I would put a contest out there and I'd say, okay, we'll pay $500 million to the first one of you diesel manufacturers who can build a natural gas engine that we can get off diesel and go to that. And oh, by the way, all you truck stops out there, we'll pay for 50% of the cost of putting natural gas in your truck stops. That could affect the energy in America faster than anything. I'd say railroads, get off diesel. The railroads are the second, next to the U.S. Navy, the railroads are Union Pacific Railroad is the second biggest user of diesel fuel past the U.S. Navy. You guys are off that, go replace your generators and those great big locomotives with natural gas. I mean, we know we've got that as a basis. That's what we ought to be using right now. That to me is more important than any other thing we could do. We should continue working on these types of things. We should start saying to people, okay, we are going to do away with halogen light bulbs. As much as I hate the bright light of LEDs, they've come a marvelous way now. You can almost get an LED that looks like these halogens around the edge right here. The LED uses 15% the power, 15% of the power that a halogen does. And there's just lots of things, lots of technologies out there right now that are changing. Now, sadly enough, an LED light costs 6 or 7 times more than a halogen does. But the fact is, it lasts 50,000 hours. It uses 15% of the power and it lasts 50,000 hours. So, I mean, it's a higher cost out there. It's the little things like that you got to go through. You've got to stimulate every one of these type of things. You've got to allow drilling to take place where drilling makes sense to do. And you've also got to have good environmental reasons, controls to make sure that we don't hurt the environment while we're doing it. But I think between conservation, I think we understand gas is readily available right now. We have an opportunity right now because of gas to really make a difference that haven't had the last 30 years. Because I mean, I think we really do have 100 years of gas out there. What we got to do is use that gas in the short term and then develop the other technologies that can do away with it before we run out of natural gas. Not just go to sleep like we usually do. But to me, you create a natural gas engine and the natural gas engines make the single biggest thing. The problem is the size of the tanks. You don't get any range because, you use up the whole trunk of your car to put a natural gas tank in. But in trucks, it's different. You've got the room in trucks, especially big over-the-road trucks, that it really can make a huge difference in. And diesel is the most valuable commodity out there right now because diesel is gas fuel. I mean, it used to be gasoline. Diesel takes less refining than gasoline, but diesel you see now is higher. It's because the world demand is diesel. It's gone through the roof. Most of your cars in Europe are all diesel now. You very seldom ever find a gas car. They're all clean diesel. So natural gas is the way for the United States, I think. Yes?
The $1 trillion battery invention,
Uh-huh.
what does it have to be capable of?
If you could get one, I mean, Rocky Mountain Power would buy 100 megawatts. They'd give you an order. They've put out about 7 orders for up to millions of dollars to anybody that can create a battery that'll last. Will create 1 megawatt of power, so 1,000 kilowatts of power for 12 hours. There's lots of, there are ones out there that will do it for 15 minutes, but you got to get one that will do it over a longer period of time, cost effectively. Because that makes solar and wind all of a sudden really valuable. All of a sudden that really makes solar and wind be a real energy source. Because right now, if the sun doesn't shine, you don't make any power, and if the wind doesn't blow. This morning driving back over here from Turtle Bay, those windmills were just standing steady. A really good wind project, you get about 40% capacity factor. The sad thing about wind is most of it's at night when you really don't need the power. Solar is when the sun shines, you need air conditioning, so it's the right time of day. The problem is solar, about the best you can get here, well, really anywhere is around a 20% capacity factor. So you're getting about 20, you know, where a coal-fired power plant will run 96, 97%, same way with a nuke, same way a gas plant will hit 98% capacity factor. Wind's 20, or solar's 20, wind's 40, and 40 is really good for wind. 40 is like here in Utah, if you get 31, 32% capacity factor, that's about the best you can do.
So coal and natural gas are the cheapest, right? So why don't we go to like coal and natural gas and then use the money that we save to invest in this more expensive stuff? You know, like for a few years, like go to the dirty fuel, even though I don't think it's that dirty, you know, but like be like China and then invest in all the more expensive stuff, and then we can share it for the rest of all time.
Well, I don't think we have to invest in the dirty stuff. We have got natural gas. We just need to use it. I totally agree with you.
Is it just because of politics or what?
Politics and if we'd have put $70 billion last year into somebody making a good natural gas engine, we would have had a really good natural gas engine. And we would have solved the issues on the tanks and all those types of things. I think we're a little bit skewed right now. I'm in the wind and solar business, so I love it, but I'm also working hard in the natural gas business because I think that is our salvation right now, that we do have a lot of it, and we have to figure out how to make that work.
We have time for one more question, folks.
Win?
Will you run for energy secretary?
I could not be elected dog catcher, and I know it.